And yeah, I think there's plenty to do on the equity side. And then let's not forget internet capital markets. There's an entire DeFi way to do this as well, which makes me even more excited. I think that maybe ruffles some more feathers, but at the same time, the opportunity set is even more profound. Imagine anyone in the world with access to the internet can buy a token when it's first launched. Like, that is very cool. So I think a lot's going on in public markets. I love the direction of travel. There's going to be some tweaking. It wasn't a home run for Monad, right? It kind of got off to a good start. It fizzled a little bit, and then they were oversubscribed in the end, which is great. But I kind of want to see more of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this is sort of getting to the heart of some of the criticism I've had for the SEC under Gensler, right? Which is, if you create a regime that's so broken that the only people who can get in as early investors are essentially qualified institutional buyer level or other really high-end people, you're creating a bifurcated market and pushing everything offshore. And when you push things offshore into highly, call it opaque platforms, you end up with problems like, at the medium end of problems, the listing process on Binance, where there's a lot of allegations of like pay to play type things, Binance taking huge cuts of tokens because there's not much competition, or at the very bad end of the scale, literally FTX. Look, I'm not saying that I'm 100% certain all of this works under current US law, but I am saying this is exactly the kind of thing the SEC should be finding a pathway for, because it's way more fair to retail to get their hands on things early on at the same terms as everybody else in a relatively transparent way through a US entity. Right. And so, Chris, I think the point that I want to hammer on here for a little bit is, again, this is kind of how these things should work if you're going to do them properly. Right. Which is to say, I don't want a lot of offshore nonsense. I don't want undisclosed terms. I want to just like shotgun this thing into the world, right, at equal terms and let everybody play. Markets, people are going to win and people are going to lose, but they need to be about fairness.
Yeah, and disclosure. They have to know what they're getting into.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm nodding my head. It's leading by example, showing how to do it the right way. It's a big win for Coinbase too, and Coinbase has a new business model here. They can curate. I think on the asset itself, there's a lot of float out there now. I think half of it is unlocked, and then in a year, another component becomes unlocked also. I think it's just a difficult market for digital assets right now, I think overall. So Monad, they've accomplished quite a bit. It's just a difficult market that the category's in.
But you like the setup, Rom.
I think where we tactically are today, things could be interesting.
Yeah.
But, can people zig and zag correctly? It's hard. That's hard, right? Like the easier games to play, right? If you try to do the zig, you're going to pay taxes, get short-term capital gains taxes. That's how my vantage point is like, all right, where can I allocate, at least get long-term capital gains?
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of it being a hard market for crypto, let's return to one of Chris and my favorite topics to close this one out, which is what I'm going to call Operation Choke Point 2.1. Which is to say, JPM allegedly closed the personal account of the founder of Strike and refused to give an answer as to why this was going on. So Jack Mallers, Strike's founder, claimed that Chase had previously closed Strike's business account during the Biden administration and said on Monday that the bank had also been rejecting some user deposits to Strike, telling customers that the business, quote, participates in fraudulent activities. There's a rumor out on the street that Morgan Stanley has also been reducing the willingness to accept collateral in the crypto space, I think as a result of the DApp thing, but including also maybe hilariously here, Coinbase stock. Chris, what do you make of a replay of these kinds of things going on yet again?
Yeah, look, I can't speak to the case, but having worked in banks, this is how it works. There's like a conveyor belt, right? And you go on that conveyor belt and off you go. If something is off, something is flagged, you fall off that conveyor belt, and it's really hard to get back on. I think under the previous administration, under Operation Choke Point, there was definitely a filter that didn't even let you get on that conveyor belt. It was like, no, we're going to find you. We're going to kick you off. I think this was I'm speculating. I've got no idea if this is true or not. But my sense is that something in the algo flagged something. It came off the conveyor belt, and I don't know. Sometimes they don't respond it's hard to get it back on the conveyor belt once it's off, and so that could have been what happened. I don't know. It's a fine line, like when you talk about the whole collateral thing as well. Banks should be allowed to manage risk, and they should. But what kind of risk are we talking about? Market risk is fine. You've got 10 years of history, and you can make informed things. That's risk management and discrimination are two different things. And I think that's where you got to kind of figure out and draw the line.
I would say for me, what I consistently run into, and by the way, if you're an executive at any of the big four banks and you're listening to this, please listen on this point, which is I think a lot of the problem banks are now having addressing crypto is not deliberate. It's that they don't have people who know how to do this or evaluate these things internally. And so the natural risk aversion of people of I don't understand, therefore no, takes over. Right. Put differently, there's no good reason not to include Coinbase stock as collateral. That is a well understood public company, other than you just feel bad about crypto and think the whole thing is going away. And I will tell you this, I have met, not an insult, zero risk managers who still work at the big banks who are genuinely qualified to manage crypto risk, right? Like anybody who's good has left and gone into the industry and is doing the thing there. So my gut reading this, honestly, is that it's actually revealing a bigger problem many of the banks have trying to get into this space, which is that it's the blind leading the blind in a lot of these places.
Yeah, same with the government, right? They can't even trade the asset. So yeah, that's going to take time.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Chris's reference there is that if you're at one of the regulatory agencies in the United States, you are literally not allowed to own digital assets. I have a personal friend who was at one of the big banks who went into government, who literally calls me on the phone and is like, hey, I've got some odd lots of crypto left over in a wallet. Can I just send it to you? Because they have to like dispose of all of this stuff before going into government service. And it's just like, how do you, it's a little bit like we expect you to regulate like traffic and automobiles, but you're not allowed to drive and you can never have owned a car.
Rob's just shaking his head.
Bananas. Yep. It's bananas. Scott Besson needs to fix that.
It's not a nothing burger.
It's not a nothing burger. Agreed.
Yeah. Well, that one, the problem is they're regulating burgers and all they have is a nothing burger.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So there's our final financial advice for the U.S. government for this episode, which is let your people trade some crypto so they know what they're doing. All right. So on that note, thank you for joining us, everybody, today for this episode of Bits and Bips. We had no advertisers because our consistent campaign of teasing XRP caused them to fire us. No, that is also a joke. But we will be back in 1 week to discuss more about how the worlds of crypto and macro are colliding. Until then, everyone take care.
Happy Thanksgiving.